So I'm continuing this short video series about plotting fiction that sells, and I've gone through the first couple, and I'm at the first pinch point. I'm pretty sure I took some of these from Plot Perfect, which is a book I really recommend for plotting. I'm pretty sure I also took a lot of these from The Story Grid, which is another really good book. There's Story Fix and Story Grid. They're both really good. This was kind of my version of the hero's journey that I've figured out after reading lots of books on plotting. So these really go back to the hero's journey or ancient Greek drama, but some of these terms might have been taken from other books that I've read. But I'm going to talk about the first pinch point, which is the first battle. So generally the first pinch point is when you see the major site of conflict. In the beginning, you may have met some characters, you've met some allies, you've met some antagonists. Generally, the antagonist won't really be aware of the protagonist yet, of the hero. But when you start getting into the story, generally the antagonist is at a direct opposition with the protagonist. It may not be personal in the beginning. It could be personal if the protagonist is the chosen one, or if they're like the only, their role has been predetermined to be the savior or to stop the antagonist, like Harry Potter and Voldemort. But otherwise, it's just because as the hero gets further in this journey, they start going after the same thing that the antagonist wants. So there's a natural conflict or opposition because the antagonist notices that the protagonist is trying to get the same thing that he's after, and that's threatening to him. So the protagonist may not be directly opposing the antagonist yet, but because of what they're trying to do and because of what they're doing in their quest, they're becoming a threat to the antagonist. It could be an indirect threat. So maybe they're not trying to stop the antagonist directly. Maybe the antagonist is not trying to stop the protagonist directly, and maybe the antagonist isn't yet involved. It could just be, for example, the antagonist has his minions out causing havoc. So the good guys' forces runs into the bad guys' forces and they have a mini battle. It doesn't have to be a battle over something. In some cases, like they may both be trying to collect ancient relics, and they're on this quest to find the ancient relics, and they find the bad guys' minions are there looking for the same thing. But it could just be they're somewhere and the bad guys' minions come in and start killing people, and because they're the good guys, they stand up for those people, and there's a fight. But the first pinch point will be where you see rising conflict. In the beginning, there's like little pieces of conflict, maybe like character on character conflict, but at the first pinch point, you'll have more of a battle scene. If you're not writing fantasy or sci-fi, it doesn't have to be an actual battle, but you'll see raised stakes and more conflict. So you'll generally get a sense of this story is bigger than I expected. The protagonist sees that there's a lot more writing on their decisions. So instead of just a small group of friends and followers, they realize they're in this, like by doing what they're trying to do or by standing up against the bad guys' forces, they realize they're really in this major large-scale conflict. And it's not just about this little battle, it's really about the fate of humanity or the world or civilization, because what the bad guys' minions are after are on a grander scale than what the protagonist had originally realized or recognized. So that's kind of what the first pinch point is. You get a first battle. Generally, they will be successful in the first battle, or at least they survive. So it's it may be they recognize a lot of things. They may have some injuries, but probably nobody gets seriously hurt. Nobody dies. They realize that the stakes are higher. They realize that there is a lot of risk involved. So someone can get hurt, and that's when they realize like this is a mortal conflict. In all stories, everything should feel like the conflict is mortal, even if it's not actually fighting and there's not an actual potential for death or dying. Even if it's just like a contemporary literary fiction, to the main character, the the stakes of failing to achieve their quest should feel like life and death stakes. So it should feel like life and death to them. It needs to really matter for the character. It can't be just something that they're like, oh, well, I give up. I'm just going to go home. I don't care. The stakes always have to matter. So even if it's not literal life and death, it has to really matter and seem like life and death to the characters who are after those goals. But if you're writing more general commercial fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, thriller, anything like that, the first pinch point, somebody probably gets seriously hurt. Somebody could die, but not one of the allies' close companions, maybe just some incidental death, so that you realize these are life and death stakes. This is a serious conflict, and they need to be more careful, and they also need to become more powerful, so that the next time they get in that kind of a conflict with the enemy forces, they'll be able to win. Like maybe they won this time, but they really got lucky, or maybe they basically escaped. Like there was a plot to get them, they fought them off, and they ran away. That's still fine. It's not really losing, but they don't suffer like a bitter defeat. Not at the first pinch point. It's just a recognition of the growing forces of the opposition and the greater stakes and the rising stakes. So they kind of recognize the conflict that they're involved in, and they have a determination to become more powerful, or to get those weapons that they need, or to get some more allies. It generally changes their goals, because now that they've realized this conflict, they get a little bit more understanding of the opposition of the enemy and who the enemy really is and who's really threatening them. And also it's a greater recognition that they need something to defeat the enemy later. Maybe they thought, they were fine, and then this is kind of where they recognize their own weakness and mortality. They realize these stakes are bigger, so they have more of a clearer idea of what they need to defeat the enemy, and that's probably going to influence the next few chapters in terms of where they go and what they do. It's generally going to be something now with their new awareness and their new understanding of the conflict. They have new goals that they're going to pursue with the aim to get that thing that they're after, or to defeat the enemy, if that's their main goal, to defeat the enemy. In the next video, we're going to talk about the midpoint, which is really critical, and a lot of books skip it. It's a really important scene and chapter, so I'm going to talk about that in the next video.